Yeah, welcome back. So Mr. George Etomi joins us now. He is the founding partner for George Etomi and Partners. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Yes, let's talk about this matter again. It's an unending one and a thorny one for a lot of people who are concerned because they think that they've not seen enough transparency, question about whose word do we believe? Now they've got to cough out this money times 3. They're not sure if there just several things going on about it. I mean, I know you had a stint or two on this particular matter. So tell us about how the kind of feedback that you have had about this matter.
Well, the feedback has been mixed, but predominantly on the side of doubts on the part of the populace. And it's understandable because a lot of these tariff movements have always been based on the assumption if you pay cost-reflective tariffs, you will get this. It's been the chicken and egg situation we've always talked about, which comes before. Do you have improved services before you raise the tariffs, or do you raise the tariffs in the hope that services will improve? Now, but I can situate the problem right from the very beginning, and that was at the onset of the privatization. It was always understood that there was a need for the tariffs to reflect the costs. And the idea behind that was that whilst investors begin to put their money in the business, they would have a clear sight of recovery of these investments, and that would come in the form of cost-reflective tariffs. But what we have seen has been the interference of policy and in many cases politics in this economic assumption. And we saw, for example, in 2014, when after the privatization had occurred, leading to the elections, tariffs were reduced instead of allowing market forces to determine it. That knocked off all the assumptions anyone could ever have had. And from that point until COVID, nearly 6 years after, even though the MITO was generally adjusted, but it was never implemented. And so when COVID hit us and there was no money in the kitty to sustain the subsidy, the regulator was simply told, okay, let's go of the tariffs. And those tariffs, if you recall, doubled. And the impact was an immediate tariff shock amongst the consuming public. I would have thought that we would have learned a lesson from that. Because no matter how well you plan, if your cost has to double without you being prepared for it, it's going to create a shock in your system. And what we saw across board was massive meter bypass. So the revenue that was projected to have come in from these increased tariffs never ever came in. Instead, you had so many disagreements and the blame game trading that was going on. Now, fast forward to 2021, we then did what they call a massive reset of the electricity supply industry. And again, it was reaffirmed that you must allow the tariffs to reflect economic realities, because MITO is projected on issues to do with your forex movements, inflation, cost of living, just like any other commodity. So it makes no sense to hold down one sector if other sectors are allowed, as it were, to allow market forces to determine their costs. And if you're going to do so, then the person responsible for that policy is best placed to carry the burden. And that's why the federal government had been carrying the subsidy burden. But we always knew that that day would come when it would not happen. And had they allowed the market reset to continue, we would have seen a situation where there would be tariff increases, but they would have been segmented. And that would likely have allowed the populace, one, to prepare and adjust their consumption habits. Secondly, to hold the distribution companies to their performance targets. Now, what we have now seen is that tariffs were again held, elections came, tariffs were held down, and it's been accumulating. We've known for the past 3 or 4 tariff cycles that the regulator had actually adjusted MITO, but it simply couldn't be implemented. Now, the government has come to the reality that $250 billion a month was unsustainable. And what do? They let go again. But this time, they've done it selectively. They've looked at what I believe they consider the least line of resistance, which is those they classify as Band A customers, on the assumption that they are the well-to-do ones, they're unlikely to hit the streets, they're unlikely to do so many things. So transfer this government burden on them. And I think that is a cause for concern. It shows poor planning and even worse, poor implementation. Because no matter how rich you are, if you are paying 200, 300,000 naira a month for electricity, and that is suddenly tripled or quadrupled, I mean, I don't know how prepared you can be to meet that expense. So, secondly,
yes, please go ahead.
I was just going to say then, don't forget, a lot of Band A customers are the industrial customers. It was very simple for them. They'll just pass the cost on to the very populace you think you are protecting. So cost of goods, cost of services, all those will be factored in. It will lead to slower growth in the economy, if not in so many cases, job losses. And again, policy has been a major problem. Yes, we recognize that gas constraints and ability to pay gas producers is the original cause, but tackling it by simply transferring the burden to just a few segments of the population, I don't think it's the right policy.
You know, and these are some of the issues that many have tried to raise. And, you know, but the thing about this too is this. Yes, they've gone ahead and then, let me use the word, targeted Band A, so to speak, thinking that it will not affect all the other people. But yes, you also highlighted it will eventually be transferred to all the others. So even those who are being sustained by Band A, several other citizens, the indigenes, the businesses, everybody will feel this at the end of the day. So speak to this. From what we understand, from what you're saying now, is that now this will not be the last of this kind of increase, by the way, because there will be another time where they have to revisit this matter. So, and if that happens, do you get the sense that they've put in place all those mechanisms to ensure that they do that reset? Because they keep telling us about MITO. Who knows, for 2025, they'll come back to the same matter.
Well, the thing is that under the new Electricity Act, the MITO review is now going to be monthly. Before it was once in every 6 months. In the UK, it's once in every 3 months. And that is because it needs to keep in touch with the realities of the market, how your currency movement goes, how your inflation goes. That's the idea, which is okay, because you too, you know yourself, whatever you buy in the market today may not necessarily be what you buy in a month's time. So the idea is to allow electricity to keep in step with market reality. So yes, you're right. This is not going to be the last increase. If we keep with what MITO says, maybe in another month we should expect something. Wow. But like I said, it is done on the assumption that the electricity industry will keep to its own end of the bargain, i.e., if you say Band A customers will get 20 hours, this MITO has been implemented instantly. But most of the complaints I receive is that we've not seen 20 hours a day. Now, it will take a little bit of time for the gas producers to have the confidence that, one, the backlog of payments will be met, and two, you can keep up with the payments of the current bills. And don't forget, you are expected that it is from the tariffs that are charged that payments will be made down the value chain. There's a waterfall. The discos keep only about 20% of their earnings, and then everything else goes down ultimately until it gets to the gas producers. The gas producers still need to be confident that at the end of the day, they will get the cost of their own gas, because they sell the gas to the generating companies. So it's a confidence game. Now, so if they don't get it, if somewhere along the line something goes wrong, they will still give you gas on what I call a best endeavor basis. You cannot hold them contractually to give you this gas. And we're looking at a contract-based market along the value chain, but it does not affect the gas producers. So the question would then be, why are we sitting on so much abundance of gas and we're having this issue? That is a federal government policy. It's a policy, it's a question you must ask and answer. And that is true. Why that? Gas is priced in dollars, it's benchmarked. Yes, we know all the expenditure, everything is in dollars, but it's benchmarked against the dollar. But we have also differentials. Gas for export is actually offered cheaper than gas for domestic use. The gas to power infrastructure hardly exists because when we gave out all our gas reserves, we never thought about domestic use. We never thought about power. The NNPC on many of these joint ventures owns a large portion of that gas, and it's all been contracted mainly for export. So why can't we as a nation decide today that a certain portion of that gas must be used for domestic use? Invite worthy investors and then give them whatever incentive you need to give to them so that a certain portion of what we sit on can go towards the domestic market, because you also must look at the multiplier effect. If we get gas at a reasonable cost, because 70% of your electricity tariff is gas, that tariff will be moderated. And if it's moderated, it will lead to growth. If it leads to growth, Nigerians will earn more. Income capacity will increase. There will be vibrancy overall. So it's not just targeting one end of the market, and then you forget that the greatest benefit for any economic growth is growing your people. This is the problem I have with the policy. Right now, everybody, no matter how rich you are groaning. There are some are thinking about job cuts. Some are thinking about don't put on this, don't put on that. We even have suggestions that you should take off your deep freezer. It's low quality life. And how do you expect performance from individuals under these circumstances? So we must really, really, really go back. And then don't forget, consumption habits at the government circles is still not what we expect it to be. The sacrifice must be all round. We still see the massive number of convoys. We hear the MDAs are still not meeting up with their debts. So the example is not being set for us to say, okay, this sacrifice is on the part of everybody. So it's a conversation we must all have. We are all patriots. We want this country to grow, but we can't punish a few for the for years of malfeasance.
Mm. Well, excuse me. What you have said, Mr. Etomi, is that this is something that has now accumulated and also have been done periodically. Government has held back, and as such, it was seen that right now they're visiting all the years of troubles on a particular class. And you said this is not how you would have, wanted to see this done. Now you have proposed something which is more,
correct.
Which is more. You propose something which looks more long term, which is addressing it at the root problem, from the supply of gas. But I'm wondering, for the short term, if governments were to say, spread this all around, is this something that, would have worked? Because clearly we need money to be able to pay the gas suppliers to be able to fire up the plants. Everybody admits that for the past couple of months in this country, it's been very difficult to get any electricity. Electricity supply has been really, really poor, and that's because of what has been happening to gas suppliers. So in the short term, what would you have proposed? Would you have said, let everybody along all the different bands carry it, even though some people are saying that, look, even this banding thingy is very discriminatory. They think that this is against the law and that the processes have not been followed.
Yes, I agree with you. But again, you see, risk allocation in this sector must be squarely on the shoulders of those who are best placed to carry this risk. If over the years, through policy instruments, you say that tariff adjustments which have been prepared by the regulator should not be implemented, if you say so, then you carry that risk. If you want others to bear the risk, then it must be in a manner that is not discriminatory. The Constitution forbids that. So you have to have that sit down. Now, I don't know if a quadrupling of the tariff has suddenly meant that all the subsidy has gone, or whether the government is still going to bear some. But the problem about applying it in the way you are doing it, it's almost as if you're asking somebody to run a race and the strong should carry the weak. But if you weaken the strong themselves, everybody comes crashing. And that's the worry I have about it. So to a direct answer, I think this should be spread across the board. The government cannot totally shy away from it. They must carry it, and then we must have a sit down and see how this can be marshaled across. Everybody needs to survive. Like I said, years of profligacy, the chicken is coming home to roost. But again, don't, as they say, kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Well, Mr. Etomi, one of the questions that I want to naturally ask is, to begin with the legislation. We had Dr. Oni earlier saying there's some form of ambiguity, even in the law, that is being operated now. For instance, one of the things that Dr. Oni said, being an energy law and policy expert, saying that the law requires that the discos should make sure that they get 20 hours per day. That's for the band A. So what happens for the 6 days that they don't get up to 20 hours, or maybe you don't even get anything at all? But on the sixth day, they fix it, and then every 6 days like that, since the law says 7 days. So how do you think there's some kind of amendment, or do you see ambiguity? Do you see transparency? What are the issues that you think people are having beyond the issues that you have discussed? What are the issues people are having about this particular thing? Because even the NERC man that we spoke to earlier said, he admitted that there are some issues with their communication.
Yeah, I mean, you have to see how you can average it out, because the law anticipates that it should average out. And the issue here is that, okay, if I don't give you power over a 7-day period for 20 hours averagely per day, and then suddenly I fix it, and then you now get power, and on the average, you get I meet the threshold set by the regulator. Technically speaking, I'm not in breach, but in practical terms, it doesn't help anybody, because the disruption is inimical to growth, is inimical to your well-being, and in some cases, as we see, it actually in some cases damages your appliances. So how do you then mitigate that? How do you then make adjustments for that? So yes, the law is ambiguous, and even more so in its application, it needs to be a bit more practical.
Well, that's not all a number of people are looking at. One of the other issues that's gone on so far until now includes the comment from the FCCPC saying that unless the Band A customers are metered, there are more questions than resolutions so far in that regard. And we've been talking about metering forever, so to speak. So do you see an issue coming from that? Because if unmetered people on Band A get those indiscriminate billing that they usually get, what's likely to happen? How do people seek redress when and where they feel that they've been hard done by?
Well, the regulator is the go-to person for redress in any dispute around this industry. And in fairness to them, they've come down hard on discos with regard to these issues of estimated billings. That's what you're referring to. And yes, metering is a sine qua non to create trust between the supplier and the receiver of the goods. So metering is a must, especially now that you say Band A customers should essentially cross-subsidize the sector. So there must be that certainty. Like I said, it's the meter that creates that trust. Now, the metering is actively going on, but I can tell you there's a problem today because, as you know, metering has been taken off the purview of the discos and been given to meter asset providers, and there are various programs for it, even though they all interface. The issue here is that even the meter asset providers are refusing to give out meters because they have disagreements with the regulator over the cost of the meters. Because they say they must be allowed to increase the cost, the advertised cost, because it's all regulated. Because if they sell at that cost, they won't be able to replace the meters for future use. Again, still the same problem we're discussing. Everybody is hit by this cycle of inflation. And this is largely slowed down metering. I've had more complaints from friends about my meter is spoiled. I've applied for meter for a long time. The reason is largely what I just described. And I hope at some time the regulator will agree on the price, because it's getting to the point where some people are saying, look, I don't care for the price, just give me the meter so that at least I know what I'm consuming. And they have a point. The argument is very strong. And it's even stronger today that you've quadrupled tariffs. People must be sure of what they consume. So you can imagine if crazy billing comes with at this time. You can imagine if crazy billing had been happening in the past and people have been upset. You can imagine if you are not metered now, you are band A, and then you get a crazy bill. You just go bananas. So metering is a must.
You know, Mr. Etomi, perhaps one of the questions to even try to resolve is why the urgency? Because it seems like there are so many issues on this particular policy of government, which has already been activated, by the way. There are questions around who bears the costs of rejected loads from discos. We've heard from experts that say if the load is too much, there will be a grid collapse. If the load is too little, is not enough, there's going to be grid collapse. Now, someone rejects load, that's the discos reject load from the gencos, and guess what? It's the customers, the consumers that bear the cost. Another issue is that of the supply. How is this supply measured? What's the assurance that what is being supplied or what's being claimed by the discos is exactly what is being supplied? Is there a measuring parameter from by the NERC or even at the discos level? There's another issue of whether or not this will even end grid collapse. So it raises the question of what's the urgency? Do you see a reason, any moral, financial, commercial, whatever justification for this sudden implementation that didn't even give people any opportunity to prepare?
Well, poor planning. I said that before, poor planning. This cycle started 11 years ago, and politics always interferes with good economics. When the new government came in, I think it was the Buhari administration, they paid, if you ask me, little attention to the fact that the sector had been privatized and went on as though it were not. So it led to a lot of friction between the new actors on the scene and the government. There were myriads of cases in court. If you remember several of those cases, it interfered with progress. And for an industry that requires constant injection of new money, it was a discouragement for investors to come into the sector. And that is what the problem you have. Very little new money is coming in, and because of the policy inconsistency. Then when suddenly it was realized that that was not the way to go, there were talks about what I said, the market reset. The reset took a long time. A lot of those cases were, in fact, most of the cases, if not all, were withdrawn from court. I was personally involved in those to create the atmosphere. Then the issue of the MDAs, debt owed by the MDAs to the market were discussed, and mechanisms were put in place to fix it. I'm surprised nearly 1 year plus after, we're still talking about MDA debts. The discos were accused at that time of not furnishing remitting all the funds we were collecting to the market. They created an escrow arrangement which had a waterfall, and the discos are almost second or third from the bottom of the waterfall. You pay the central bank, you pay the market, you pay everybody, so that way you know that nobody is holding on to your funds. So at times, when discos are accused of not remitting, this is what's going on. So, and what happened when that was implemented was that quite a number of discos could not meet with what I call their minimum remittance obligations because they had no control of their funds. And as you can see, about 5 or 6 of those discos have now been taken over and new owners have come in. Now, once you cannot hold anybody to any obligation, the whole idea is that from gas to distribution, you should be able to enforce the obligations contractually. But as I've told you, from the gas end, the gas people are saying, sorry, we cannot be part of this. We'll give gas whenever we feel we can give it to you. And talking about grid collapse, once the grid is underloaded, it has a disturbance. If it's overloaded, it has a disturbance. And in any case, its optimum capacity, working at the best, is not more than 5,000 megawatts. But lately, we've been seeing only 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. Load rejection. Discos are telling you, I will not take load if I have to meet 100% of my market obligations. And usually it's the TCN that takes the load to balance the grid to various places. And the disco says, please, I need more power in Ikoyi or VI because I know I can get my revenue to meet with my minimum remittance obligations. TCN says, no, we have to balance the grid, so I must give you power somewhere, and I know I'm not going to recover the money, I'll reject the load. So that's what leads to load rejection. So it's so many forces are at play. You are dealing with economic reality as against policies that are trying to accommodate the feelings of people who have enjoyed this commodity as a social service.
All right. So we do thank you very much indeed for your perspectives this morning. Mr. George Etomi is a founding partner, George Etomi and Partners.
Thank you.
All right, we do have an email from Dixon Eka about this. He says, look, is President Tinubu elected just to remove subsidy on all items in Nigeria and to impoverish the people? While Nigerians are yet to recover from the shocks of fuel subsidy removal and floating of Naira, with many rich people now going into multi-dimensional poverty, he's come up with yet another subsidy removal on an unexisting electricity. 11 months in power, he says, no major infrastructural or legacy projects has been initiated. Well, by the president. Mr. Adelabu has never for once mentioned any attempt he's making to improve electricity. His announcement has been on electricity price hike only, and then he goes on to say, look, I recharged for 20,000 Naira and the unit finished in less than 3 days, and he goes on and on. Well, Dixon, we do hear you, but okay, so...
That hurts, certainly.
I know, it's...
that hurts, and you can see his pain.
Feedback in terms of how the policies government is taking is coming across to the people. Yes, they may say we're doing a thing or two, but this is just how some persons perceive whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, Ayo, you got any update for us? Oh, no, look at this.
We're totally out of time, Chamberlain.
Okay, all right then. So there you go. That wraps it up then. We look at some of the issues we've got for you this morning. Well, not to worry. We will be back here again tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Well, cheers to another weekend coming up right there tomorrow, and next tomorrow is a public holiday. We wish you, hope you have a great one, regardless of what the electricity tariff is saying. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf, and I think I also owes you the location of where he was showing you in terms of the skyline of Lagos
and the breaking news too.
Ayo.
Well, you guys, you already gave me the idea that, well, since we don't have enough time, I guess I'm going to keep that until some other time. Where is that part of Lagos? You can scroll back to the beginning to find out where it is. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your day. And Barka da Sallah. I'm Ayo Makinde.